Everyone knows the show. The huge laughs. The actors corpsing mid-scene. Agnes Brown losing her temper over nothing at all. Mrs. Brown's Boys grew from a small stage act into a BBC ratings giant and a fixture of Christmas television. But away from the punchlines and the famous purple cardigan, there's a much messier story. One involving burnout, pay disputes, family strain, and the real price of being part of the O'Carroll family's TV empire. One actor walked away after 26 years with nothing but a supermarket carrier bag for his belongings. Others ended up in legal disputes that cracked the show's carefully maintained one big happy family image. Here's a closer look at why some of the show's most familiar faces eventually decided they'd had enough. Rory Cowan's departure is the one that hit hardest. He wasn't simply an actor playing Rory Brown. He'd inhabited that role since the very beginning, going back to the original radio sketches in the 1990s, through years of stage touring, all the way to the show becoming one of BBC One's flagship comedies. He was there before any of it was famous. So when he announced he was stepping down in July 2017, it caught fans off guard. His last performance came at London's O2 Arena in front of a sold-out crowd. What followed was almost anticlimactic. After more than 2 decades tied to one character, he packed up his things in a plastic shopping bag and left quietly. No goodbye episode, no on-screen send-off, just an ending. Cowan later explained that the decision came down to plain exhaustion. He said he'd been unhappy for around a year and a half before finally quitting, not because of any falling out with the cast, but because the job itself had become punishing. Constant touring, the same jokes performed the same way night after night. Once the show locked into its BBC format, nothing about it could change. After 26 years of that repetition, it stopped feeling like fun and started feeling like a routine he couldn't escape. The real turning point, though, was personal. While on tour, Cowan's mother was hospitalized after what doctors initially suspected was a stroke. She was later diagnosed with dementia. His sister, calling from Australia, told him he needed to get home immediately, but the production's insurance provider said a sick parent wasn't grounds for leaving the tour. He was told he'd only be granted time off if she passed away, so he could attend the funeral. That was the moment something shifted for him. Cowan has never publicly criticized Brendan O'Carroll or the show, and O'Carroll himself was reportedly supportive, comparing the exit to a star footballer leaving a major club. There was no public falling out, just a quiet parting of ways. Since leaving, Cowan has said he doesn't stay in contact with the cast. Not out of resentment, just closure, though O'Carroll occasionally texts him about royalty payments. The show tried to write around his absence with an odd storyline involving plastic surgery and a new actor stepping into the role, but the message to fans was clear enough. For Cowan, choosing to step away from a role that had swallowed 26 years of his life made sense. Even the show never quite managed to explain it. If Cowan's exit was low-key, Gary Hollywood's was the opposite. Public, contentious, and ultimately about money. Hollywood played Dino Doyle, the flamboyant Scottish hairdresser, from the show's BBC One debut in 2011. For close to a decade, he brought warmth and comic timing to the role, and his on-screen partnership with Rory Brown, played first by Cowan, later by Damien McKiernan, was a fan favorite. Everything changed in 2020. Earlier that year, Hollywood and McKiernan discovered they were being paid noticeably less than other members of the cast, including Brendan O'Carroll and his real-life wife Jennifer Gibney, who plays Kathy Brown. This wasn't a minor gap. It was substantial enough to leave both actors feeling blindsided and undervalued, especially given they were putting the same work on a show pulling in huge viewership and revenue for the BBC. Rather than staying silent, Hollywood and McKiernan raised the issue with producers, asking simply for equal pay for equal work. The response, according to Hollywood, was to scale back his role. He was told he'd appear in only one of that year's Christmas specials, which felt less like a scheduling choice and more like retaliation for speaking up. In an interview with OK Magazine in August 2021, Hollywood described it as the worst year of his life, citing the emotional toll of feeling underpaid, receiving no real explanation for decisions affecting his role, and getting nowhere when he tried to resolve things through proper channels. He also said the pay gap extended to the spin-off show All Round to Mrs. Brown's, reinforcing his sense that he was being treated as less valuable than his co-stars. Perhaps hardest of all, Hollywood has said he hasn't spoken to Brendan O'Carroll since the dispute, a painful outcome after nearly a decade with a cast he'd considered family. The fallout escalated in 2021 when both Hollywood and McKiernan filed legal claims against O'Carroll, the BBC, and production company Hungry Bear Media, alleging discrimination and unfair dismissal. That Christmas and New Year, the specials aired without either actor and drew the show's lowest viewing figures up to that point. The storyline explanation offered on-screen, a mention that the characters had traveled to Wuhan, landed awkwardly given the pandemic timing. By October 2020, it was confirmed that both characters were gone from the show for good. There was an upside for Hollywood, though. He said that leaving gave him a freedom he hadn't felt in years. Over 9 seasons, he'd turned down other acting opportunities because of the commitment to the show, and many of those doors reopened once he left. While the show had given him financial security, he felt it had also boxed him into one comedic role for so long that he wanted a chance to prove himself in more serious, dramatic work. Brendan O'Carroll has publicly denied that a pay dispute occurred, but the show's tight-knit image had already taken a visible hit. Damien McKiernan's departure is one of the more understated stories in the show's history. He joined in 2017 to take over the role of Rory Brown from Cowan. No small task, stepping into a character that had been defined by one actor for 26 years. Fans were initially wary, but McKiernan won them over, respecting what came before while making the role his own. His on-screen chemistry with Hollywood worked well, and for a while it looked like he'd settled into the part long-term. His run lasted about 3 years. Behind the scenes, he was caught up in the same pay dispute that pushed Hollywood out in 2020, discovering he too was earning considerably less than other cast members. But where Hollywood spoke openly to the press about what happened, McKiernan said almost nothing. He was part of the same legal action and affected by the same disparities, yet he gave no interviews and offered no public explanation. He simply stopped appearing. That silence is telling in its own way. Whatever the reason, legal advice, personal preference, or something else, his exit came with no farewell, no closing storyline, nothing to market. Since leaving, McKiernan has continued acting and devoted much of his time to charity work, particularly with children's health organizations in Ireland. His low profile since departing doesn't erase the questions his exit raised about how certain cast members were treated behind the scenes. Not every exit was about money. Fiona O'Carroll's departure is different because she isn't just a cast member. She's Brendan O'Carroll's daughter, and she played Maria Brown for years. For her, the show wasn't just a job. It was a family business, which made any decision to step back far more complicated. By 2022, Fiona had quietly reduced her involvement. Her reasons were more personal than dramatic. After years playing the same character, she began to feel boxed in by it. The role gave her stability and kept her close to her family, but it also tied her to an identity she was ready to move beyond. She wanted